The sun painted the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and red as Paige Galloway stepped down from the stagecoach, her leather boots kicking up dust in the small frontier town of Redemption Creek. The year was 1875, and the West was still wild, untamed, and dangerous, just like her reputation that seemed to follow her wherever she went. "You sure this is where you want to get off, miss?" the stagecoach driver asked, eyeing her warily. "Ain't much here for a lady traveling alone." Paige adjusted her worn hat and lifted her chin. At 24, she'd survived worse than suspicious looks. "I'm sure," she replied, reaching for her single trunk. Her green eyes scanned the dusty main street with its weathered wooden buildings. This would do just fine. The driver shrugged, tossing down her trunk before climbing back onto his seat. "Suit yourself. Hotel's down the way. You might want to check in before sunset. Folks around here get nervous about strangers after dark." As the stagecoach pulled away, Paige felt the familiar weight of stares from the townsfolk. She'd grown accustomed to them over the years, the sideways glances, the whispers. In Virginia City, they'd called her that wild Galloway girl after she'd punched a banker's son for trying to steal a kiss. In Denver, rumors spread about the unmarried woman who could outshoot most men at the fair. Now she was just passing through, looking for something she couldn't quite name. The hotel was a 2-story clapboard building with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Inside, the proprietress, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, looked Paige up and down before pushing the registry book toward her. "Rooms 50 cents a night. Payment in advance," she said flatly. Paige counted out the coins and signed her name. "How long has the saloon across the street been open?" she asked casually. The woman sniffed. "The Silver Dollar, going on 8 years now, but it ain't a place for decent women." Paige smiled thinly. "Then I suppose I'll fit right in." After settling into her sparse room, Paige changed into her cleanest shirt and trousers clothing that had caused scandal in the last 3 towns she'd passed through. But practical attire was necessary for a woman who had to rely on herself. She tucked her small pistol into her belt, covered by her jacket, and headed downstairs. The Silver Dollar Saloon buzzed with activity, piano music, raucous laughter, and the clink of glasses. Paige pushed through the swinging doors, immediately drawing attention. The piano player missed a note, conversations halted momentarily, and several cowboys turned to stare. She kept her stride, confident as she approached the bar. "Whiskey," she said to the bartender, sliding a coin across the worn wood. "We don't serve ladies here," the mustached man replied, not touching her money. "Good thing I'm just a paying customer then," Paige replied evenly. A deep voice from the end of the bar cut in. "Give the lady what she asked for, Joe." Paige turned to see a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes watching her with amusement. Unlike the other patrons, his gaze held no judgment, only curiosity. His dark hair curled slightly at the edges of his collar, and his clothes, while dusty from the trail, were of good quality. A silver star pinned to his vest identified him as the local law. The bartender grumbled but poured her drink. Paige nodded her thanks to the stranger before taking a sip, welcoming the familiar burn. "You passing through?" the man asked, moving closer. "That depends," she answered guardedly. He extended his hand. "Isaac Turner, town sheriff." Paige hesitated before shaking it. "Paige Galloway." "What brings you to our little corner of nowhere, Miss Galloway?" she shrugged. "Work, if there's any to be had." Sheriff Turner studied her for a moment. "What kind of work does a woman in men's clothing with a hidden pistol look for?" Paige stiffened. "The kind that pays." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at a card table. 2 men stood facing each other, one red-faced with anger, the other smirking. "You're cheating, Morgan." The angry one shouted, "Prove it or sit down, Jenkins." The other man replied coolly. Sheriff Turner sighed. "Excuse me, Miss Galloway, duty calls." As he walked away to diffuse the situation, Paige observed him, the way he moved with quiet authority, how the men respected his presence without him raising his voice. There was something different about Isaac Turner, something that made her curious despite her better judgment. The next morning, Paige set out to explore the town and seek employment. Redemption Creek was larger than it had first appeared, with a general store, blacksmith, small schoolhouse, and even a photographer's studio. She tried the general store first. "No positions available," the proprietor said curtly after giving her attire a disapproving once-over. The dressmaker was equally unhelpful, and the hotel had already made it clear they weren't hiring. By midday, Paige sat on a bench outside the general store, contemplating her dwindling funds and next move. "No luck," Sheriff Turner's voice startled her from her thoughts. She looked up to find him standing before her, hat in hand. The sunlight caught in his dark hair, revealing strands of chestnut among the black. "Not unless I'm willing to work at Madame Rosa's," she replied dryly, referring to the establishment at the edge of town that catered to lonely men. Isaac chuckled. "I might have something more suitable. My deputy left last week, headed to California for gold fever. I need someone who can handle paperwork and keep an eye on things when I'm out on patrol." Paige raised an eyebrow. "A female deputy. The town council approved that." "They approved a clerk position," he clarified. "But I don't see why you couldn't handle some deputy duties too, unofficially. I've seen the way you carry yourself. You know how to use that pistol you keep hidden, don't you?" "Better than most," she admitted. "Then stop by the office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. As he walked away, Paige found herself staring after him, wondering what kind of sheriff would hire a woman he barely knew, especially one with her reputation. The town jail and sheriff's office was a simple building with a desk, 3 cells, and a small back room. Paige arrived precisely at 8, finding Isaac sorting through a stack of wanted posters. "Good morning," she said, removing her hat. Isaac looked up and smiled. "You came. I half expected you'd have moved on by now." "The stagecoach doesn't leave until Thursday," she replied with a hint of a smile. "Besides, I need the money." "It's not much," he warned. $20 a month plus room and board if you want to move into the back room. It's small but more private than the hotel." Paige considered the offer. The salary was modest, but the free lodging made it attractive. "What exactly would my duties be?" "Filing reports, keeping the office clean, logging prisoners in and out." He paused. "And if you're willing, I could use someone who can shoot straight when trouble comes to town." "And it does. Come to town, I mean." Isaac's expression darkened slightly. "Often enough. We're the last stop before open country. Cattle rustlers, bandits, and the occasional desperate man on the run all pass through here." Paige nodded. "I accept your offer, Sheriff Turner." "Isaac," he corrected. "If we're going to work together, you might as well use my name." That afternoon, Paige moved her few belongings into the small room behind the office. It was spare but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. Through the thin wall, she could hear Isaac moving around in the main office, the occasional jingle of his spurs marking his steps. Life fell into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Paige proved herself efficient with paperwork and unflappable when drunks were brought in to sleep it off. The townspeople regarded her with suspicion at first, but gradually began to accept her presence at the sheriff's office, especially after she helped the blacksmith's wife when her wagon broke down outside of town. Isaac, for his part, treated her with a respect she'd rarely experienced. He didn't question her past or why she chose to wear trousers instead of dresses. He simply accepted her as she was, which was both refreshing and unsettling. Paige had spent so long defending herself that his easy acceptance left her uncertain how to respond. Their first real test came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Paige was alone in the office, organizing wanted posters when the door burst open. A man staggered in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Where's the sheriff?" he gasped, clutching the door frame. Paige rushed to support him. "Out on patrol. What happened?" "Stagecoach robbery," the man wheezed as she helped him to a chair. 4 miles north, 3 men with bandanas. They took everything and shot the driver. Paige's mind raced. Isaac had ridden south that morning, checking on reports of cattle rustling. "He wouldn't be back until morning. Is anyone else hurt?" she asked, pressing a clean cloth to the man's wound. "Passenger, woman with a little boy. They dragged them off the road, said they'd keep them until morning." Paige made her decision instantly. "Can you identify any of the men?" The injured man nodded weakly. One had a scar across his nose. Think it was the Pharaoh gang. They've hit coaches before. Paige locked the man in one of the cells for his own safety and scribbled a note for Isaac. Then she gathered supplies: ammunition, rope, bandages, and a flask of whiskey. She saddled Isaac's spare horse, a steady gelding named Buck, and headed north into the gathering darkness. The rain had stopped, but the moon remained hidden behind clouds, making tracking difficult. Paige followed the stagecoach road, alert for any sign of the robbery. About 4 miles out, she found the coach tilted on its side, the driver's body sprawled nearby. She dismounted, examining the scene carefully. Boot prints led away from the road toward a stand of trees in the distance. Paige could make out a faint light flickering among them, probably a campfire. She tethered Buck to a tree well back from the road and proceeded on foot, her pistol ready. As she approached, she could hear men's voices and the frightened whimpers of a child. Crouching behind a boulder, Paige observed the camp. 3 men sat around a small fire, passing a bottle. A woman and young boy, perhaps 5 years old, were tied to a tree several feet away. Paige assessed her options. She was outnumbered, but the men appeared to be drinking heavily. Their rifles were stacked against a log within her sight but out of their immediate reach. She would have to be smart about this. Taking a deep breath, she fired her pistol into the air and called out in her most authoritative voice. "This is the law. You're surrounded. Release your hostages and throw down your weapons." The men scrambled for their guns, firing wildly into the darkness. Paige kept low, circling to a different position before firing again, creating the illusion of multiple lawmen. One bullet found its mark, and a man howled in pain, clutching his shoulder. "Next one goes through your head," she shouted. "Throw down your weapons." "How many are there?" One bandit hissed to another. "Must be a whole posse," the wounded one groaned. The third man, the one with the scarred nose, seemed more calculating. "Show yourselves then," he called back. Paige fired again, deliberately close to his feet. "Last warning." The scarred man hesitated, then tossed his gun aside. "Don't shoot, we're giving up." The other 2 followed suit. Paige approached cautiously, keeping her pistol trained on them as she emerged from the shadows. The scarred man's eyes widened. "It's just one woman." He snarled, lunging toward his discarded weapon. Paige fired, the bullet kicking up dirt inches from his hand. "The next one won't miss," she promised, her voice steady. Using the rope she'd brought, Paige bound the men securely, then freed the woman and child. The boy clung to his mother, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Are you hurt?" Paige asked them. The woman shook her head, though her wrists were raw from the ropes. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." "Let's get you somewhere safe," Paige replied, helping them onto Buck while she led the horse back toward town, the 3 prisoners trudging ahead at gunpoint. It was nearly dawn when they reached Redemption Creek. Isaac was waiting outside the sheriff's office, his face tight with worry. When he spotted Paige leading the procession, relief washed over his features, quickly followed by something like admiration. "Found some trouble, did you?" he asked as she approached. "Nothing I couldn't handle," she replied, suddenly exhausted now that the danger had passed. Isaac helped her secure the prisoners in the cells, then tended to the woman and child, arranging rooms for them at the hotel. When they were finally alone in the office, he turned to Paige with serious eyes. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said quietly. "Probably both," she admitted. "But there was a child involved. I couldn't wait." Isaac's expression softened. "No, you couldn't. That's who you are, isn't it? Always ready to jump into the fray when someone needs help." Paige looked away, uncomfortable with his assessment. "I just did what needed doing." He stepped closer, gently turning her face back toward him. "You did what most men in this town wouldn't have dared. You saved lives tonight, Paige." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, an understanding. Paige felt her heart quicken as Isaac's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should get some rest," he said. "I'll handle things from here." News of Paige's heroics spread quickly through town. Some regarded her with newfound respect, while others seemed even more unsettled by a woman who could outshoot and outcalculate 3 armed men. The stage line offered her a reward, which she declined, suggesting it go to the driver's widow instead. Isaac said little about that night, but Paige noticed changes in how he treated her. He began teaching her tracking skills, showing her how to read sign in the wilderness. He included her when discussing strategies for handling potential trouble. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. 3 weeks after the stagecoach incident, a stranger rode into town. Tall and well-dressed, with a trimmed beard and calculating eyes, he caused a stir among the townspeople. Paige was alone in the office when he entered, removing his hat with a flourish. "I'm looking for Sheriff Turner," he announced. "He's out on patrol," Paige replied, setting aside the report she'd been writing. "Can I help you?" The man looked her up and down, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And you would be?" "Paige Galloway, I assist the sheriff." "Fascinating," he murmured. "Well, Miss Galloway, please inform Sheriff Turner that Thomas Rutledge would like to speak with him upon his return." Paige recognized the name instantly. Rutledge owned the largest cattle operation in the territory and had a reputation for aggressive business tactics. "What business do you have with the sheriff, Mr. Rutledge?" she asked. The man's smile tightened. "Private business, my dear. I'll be staying at the hotel. Have him call on me there." With a slight bow, he departed, leaving Paige troubled. When Isaac returned that evening, she relayed the message. His expression darkened immediately. "Rutledge," he muttered. "I wondered when he'd show up." "What does he want?" Paige asked. Isaac sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Land, most likely. He's been buying up properties all along the creek, wants to control the water rights for the entire valley. And if people don't want to sell, accidents happen. Fences get cut, barns burn down, cattle disappear." Isaac's voice was grim. "Nothing that can be traced back to him, of course." "Has he threatened you?" "Not directly. But the last sheriff left town suddenly after opposing some of Rutledge's plans. The town council hired me because I have a reputation for standing up to men like him." He met her gaze. "Things might get difficult around here, Paige. If you want to move on, I'd understand." The suggestion stung more than she expected. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," he answered quickly. "God, no, but I don't want you caught in the crossfire either." Paige stepped closer, surprising herself with her boldness. "I've been caught in crossfires my whole life, Isaac. I'm not afraid of men like Rutledge." Something flickered in his eyes, pride, perhaps, or something deeper. "No, I don't suppose you are afraid of much at all." The following day, Isaac met with Rutledge at the hotel. He returned to the office looking troubled. "He wants to buy the Jenkins place," Isaac explained, referring to a small farm at the edge of town. "Old man Jenkins died last winter and his daughter can't manage it alone. Rutledge is offering good money." "But—" Paige prompted, sensing there was more. "But that land controls access to the creek that feeds half the farms in the valley. If Rutledge gets it, he can dam the water or charge for access." Isaac paced the small office. "It's legal, but it would ruin a dozen families. What can we do?" Isaac smiled slightly at her use of "we." "Jenkins' daughter, Ellie, doesn't want to sell. She knows what it would mean for her neighbors. But she's getting pressure, minor vandalism, warnings from concerned citizens about a woman living alone being unsafe. Threats," Paige translated. "Exactly. I've advised her to stay in town for now, but Rutledge is patient. He'll wait her out." That evening, as they shared a simple supper in the office, Paige voiced an idea that had been forming. What if someone helped Ellie run the farm, someone who could also keep an eye out for trouble? Isaac looked up sharply. "You're not suggesting yourself? Why not? I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. I know how to tend crops and animals." "It's too dangerous," he protested. "Rutledge's men wouldn't hesitate to hurt you." Paige raised an eyebrow. "They'd have to catch me first. And I seem to recall handling 3 armed men on my own not long ago." "This is different," Isaac insisted, his voice rising with emotion. "Rutledge doesn't play fair, he's ruthless." "So am I when necessary," she countered. "Besides, you can't spare men to guard the place around the clock." "This makes sense, Isaac." They argued late into the night, but eventually, Isaac conceded that her plan had merit, though he insisted on certain conditions, including daily check-ins and reinforced locks on all doors and windows. The next day, Paige moved into the small farmhouse with Ellie Jenkins, a quiet woman of 30 with tired eyes and calloused hands. The two women quickly established a routine. Ellie handled the household and garden while Paige tended the livestock and kept watch. Isaac rode out each evening to check on them, often staying for supper before reluctantly returning to town. For 2 weeks, life proceeded peacefully. The farm began to thrive under their combined efforts, and Ellie's spirits lifted. But Paige remained vigilant, aware that Rutledge was merely biding his time. The attack came on a moonless night. Paige was awakened by the smell of smoke and the panicked bleating of goats. She grabbed her pistol and rushed outside to find the barn ablaze, two mounted figures silhouetted against the flames. "Fire!" she shouted to Ellie, who appeared in the doorway. "Get water!" Paige fired a warning shot into the air. "This is private property, identify yourselves." Instead of answering, one of the riders raised a rifle. Paige dove behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around her. She returned fire, aiming carefully. One rider cried out, clutching his arm, before both men galloped away into the darkness. With Ellie's help and several neighbors who spotted the fire, they managed to save half the barn and all the livestock. By dawn, the embers were cooling and Isaac had arrived, his face lined with worry and anger. "This ends now," he declared, surveying the damage. "I'm arresting Rutledge." "On what charge?" Paige asked. "We can't prove he ordered this." "Doesn't matter. I'll find something to hold him on while we investigate." Isaac's blue eyes blazed with determination. "I won't let him terrorize this town anymore." But when they returned to Redemption Creek, they discovered Rutledge had departed suddenly for Denver, leaving his foreman to handle his affairs. Without Rutledge himself to question, Isaac found himself at a temporary impasse. That night, Isaac insisted Paige return to her room behind the jail. "At least until we sort this out," he said. "I need to know you're safe." His concern touched her, though she tried not to show it. "I can take care of myself," she reminded him. "I know you can," he replied softly, "but I'd sleep better knowing you were nearby." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Paige found herself wanting to reach out, to bridge the gap that seemed to be narrowing between them day by day. Instead, she nodded her agreement. In the following days, Isaac received telegrams from contacts in Denver, building a case against Rutledge for various land fraud schemes. Paige divided her time between helping at the Jenkins farm during the day and returning to town at night, always aware of Isaac's protective gaze. One evening, as they walked back from dinner at the hotel restaurant, Isaac guided her toward the edge of town, where a small creek cut through a stand of cottonwoods. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her along a narrow path. They emerged in a small clearing beside the water, where wildflowers bloomed in the moonlight. The sound of the creek gurgling over rocks created a peaceful backdrop to the chorus of night insects. "It's beautiful," Paige breathed, momentarily forgetting the troubles that had consumed their attention. "I come here to think," Isaac said, standing close beside her. "It reminds me why this place is worth fighting for." Paige turned to him, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how intimate the moment felt. "And what are we fighting for, Isaac?" His eyes, silvered by moonlight, searched hers. "A place where people can live freely without fear. Where a woman can wear trousers and carry a gun if she chooses without being judged for it." "Is that what you see when you look at me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who needs defending," Isaac shook his head slowly. "No, I see someone who defends others. Someone who's brave and fierce and—" He paused, swallowing hard. "And beautiful in ways that take my breath away." The confession hung between them like a tangible thing. Paige felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Isaac slowly raised his hand to touch her cheek. "I've wanted to do this since the day you walked into my town," he murmured, before lowering his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Paige responded, sliding her arms around his neck, Isaac pulled her closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that matched her own rising desire. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want you to think I expect anything," he said. "I respect you too much for that," Paige smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I know, that's why I trust you." They walked back to town hand in hand, aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. Neither spoke of love, it was too soon, too fragile, but the possibility of it hummed in the air around them. The following week brought news that Rutledge had been arrested in Denver for fraud and would not be returning to pressure Ellie Jenkins or anyone else in Redemption Creek. The town celebrated with an impromptu dance at the Silver Dollar, the usual rough establishment transformed by lanterns and fiddle music. Isaac led Paige onto the makeshift dance floor, ignoring the raised eyebrows of some townspeople. "They'll talk," he warned her quietly. "Let them," she replied, placing her hand in his. "I've been talked about my whole life." As they moved together to the music, Paige caught snippets of conversation from nearby dancers. That wild Galloway woman, living at the jail with Turner. Dressed like a man but dances like a lady. Isaac heard it too, his jaw tightening with anger, but before he could speak, an older man, the blacksmith whose wife Paige had helped cut in with a loud voice. "They called her wild when she first came to town, but that ain't right. The sheriff told me straight, she's free, that's different, and he's right about that. We could use more free people in this town." The comments silenced the gossip, at least temporarily. Isaac squeezed Paige's hand, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. As the dance continued, more townspeople approached Paige, offering thanks for her role in protecting Ellie Jenkins and standing against Rutledge. Later, walking back to the jail under a canopy of stars, Isaac asked, "Does it bother you what people say?" Paige considered before answering. "It used to. I spent years trying to prove I was just as capable as any man, only to be dismissed as wild or unnatural. But now," she looked up at him, "now I'm starting to see that being different isn't something to hide." Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Paige, I need to tell you something. I received a letter from the territorial governor yesterday. He's offered me a position as U.S. Marshal," her heart stuttered. "You're leaving?" The position would cover the entire Northern Territory. I'd be based here, but there would be extensive travel. He took both her hands in his. "Before I met you, I would have accepted immediately. Now I find myself hesitating." "Why?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Because I don't want to leave you," he said simply. "Or ask you to wait for a man who might be gone for weeks at a time." Paige felt a surge of emotion, fear, hope, and something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. "What if you didn't have to choose?" she suggested. "What if I came with you at least sometimes?" Isaac's eyes widened. "As what, my wife?" The question hung in the air, more proposal than query. Paige drew a shaky breath. "Is that what you're asking?" "Not very well," he admitted with a nervous laugh. "I'd planned to do this properly with a ring and on one knee. When have we ever done anything properly?" She countered, stepping closer. Isaac's smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Paige Galloway, you walked into my town and turned everything upside down. You're the bravest, most infuriating, most magnificent woman I've ever known. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." He did drop to one knee then, right there in the dusty street, looking up at her with eyes full of promise. "Will you marry me, not to tame you or change you, but to stand beside you, whatever path you choose?" Paige felt tears prick her eyes, a rare occurrence for a woman who prided herself on her strength. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes." As he rose to kiss her, neither of them noticed the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered Ellie Jenkins, the blacksmith and his wife, even the hotel proprietress who had once looked at Paige with such disapproval. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town. Paige wore a simple blue dress, her one concession to tradition, but kept her pistol strapped to her thigh beneath it, a fact that made Isaac laugh when she told him. "I wouldn't expect anything less," he said, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his formal suit. The ceremony was brief, the celebration afterward more enthusiastic. The entire town turned out, curiosity mingling with genuine goodwill as they toasted the sheriff and his unconventional bride. As the sun set, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that had greeted Paige when she first arrived, Isaac led her away from the festivities toward their home, the small house he had purchased near the creek where they had first kissed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Turner, he said, lifting her over the threshold. Paige wrinkled her nose. That sounds strange. Would you prefer I still call you Galloway? He asked, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. I'd prefer you call me Paige, she replied, and remember that taking your name doesn't mean I've changed who I am. Isaac's smile was tender as he brushed his lips against hers. I would never want you to change. Your freedom, your wildness, they're what I fell in love with. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets, Paige traced the scar on Isaac's shoulder, a remnant from his days tracking outlaws before becoming sheriff. Tell me about being a marshal, she said. What would it mean for us? Isaac propped himself up on one elbow, his free hand drawing lazy patterns on her bare skin. Long rides, difficult men, danger, he admitted, but also purpose, justice, and seeing more of this territory than most people ever will. And where would I fit? Wherever you choose, he replied. You could stay here, help Ellie with the farm, keep an eye on the town when I'm gone. Or, he hesitated, or, she prompted, or you could come with me sometimes. I could deputize you officially this time. The governor didn't specify that my deputies had to be men. Paige laughed, delighted by the idea. A female deputy marshal, that would cause a scandal from here to Washington. Probably, Isaac agreed with a grin, but you've never been one to avoid scandal, have you? She sobered, running her fingers along his jaw. Are you sure about this, about me? I'm not exactly the quiet, supportive wife most men want. Isaac gathered her closer, his blue eyes serious. Paige, I don't want most men's wife. I want you complicated, brave, occasionally reckless you. I love that you wear trousers and can outshoot most men. I love that you jumped into danger to save a woman and child you'd never met. I love that you stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. His words washed over her like a healing balm, soothing hurts she hadn't realized still lingered from years of judgment and rejection. I love you too, she whispered, the words new and precious on her tongue. A week later, Isaac received confirmation of his appointment as U.S. Marshal. The letter included authorization to select his own deputies, with the governor noting that in these changing times, qualification should be valued over convention. He's giving you permission to deputize me, Paige observed, reading over his shoulder. Seems that way, Isaac replied. What do you think? Ready to make history as one of the first female deputy marshals in the territory? Paige's grin was answer enough. Their first assignment came 2 days later, tracking a gang of bank robbers who had struck in Helena before heading south. Isaac and Paige set out at dawn, well-equipped and ready for the chase. As they rode side by side, Paige felt a sense of rightness, of belonging that she had searched for her entire life. The trail led them into the mountains, where pine forests provided cover and cold streams offered refreshment. They made camp each night beneath the stars, sometimes talking late into the darkness, sometimes communicating in other, wordless ways that left them breathless and entwined. On the 5th day, they located the robbers' hideout, a deserted trapper's cabin in a remote valley. 4 men, all armed and dangerous according to the wanted posters. We should wait for reinforcements, Isaac suggested as they observed from a hidden position. Paige nodded her agreement, surprising him. What? She asked, noticing his expression. I can be cautious when it makes sense. He chuckled softly. You're full of surprises, Mrs. Turner. They maintained their surveillance through the night, taking turns watching while the others slept. Near dawn, however, their plans changed when a young woman emerged from the cabin, clearly distressed. One of the men shoved her roughly back inside. They have a hostage, Paige whispered urgently. We can't wait. Isaac's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. We'll need to draw them out, separate them. Together, they formulated a plan. Paige circled around to approach from behind the cabin, while Isaac created a distraction at the front, a classic pincer movement that relied on precision and trust. When the sun crested the mountains, bathing the valley in golden light, Isaac moved into position. He fired 2 shots into the air, then called out, U.S. Marshal, come out with your hands up. The cabin erupted in activity, cursing, the sound of weapons being readied. 2 men burst out the front door, guns blazing, while a third dragged the young woman out as a shield. Drop your weapons or she dies, the man shouted, pressing a pistol to the terrified woman's temple. Isaac stood his ground, his own weapon steady. "You're surrounded, release her and surrender, like hell," the outlaw snarled, backing toward the trees with his hostage. That was when Paige made her move, emerging silently from behind the cabin. With precision born of practice, she struck the man with the butt of her rifle. As he crumpled, the young woman broke free, running toward Isaac. The remaining robbers, realizing they were indeed caught in a crossfire, quickly surrendered. As Isaac bound them, Paige comforted the young woman, a shopkeeper's daughter who had been kidnapped during the bank robbery, to ensure the gang's escape. By midday, they were headed back toward civilization, the prisoners secured and the young woman safe. Isaac rode beside Paige, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper. "You were magnificent," he told her quietly. "I've worked with seasoned lawmen who couldn't have handled that situation better." Paige felt a warm glow at his praise. "We make a good team." "The best," he agreed, reaching across to squeeze her hand. Their reputation grew over the following months. Turner and his wild deputy, people called them, though the description held respect rather than derision. They tracked rustlers through blizzards, negotiated peace between settlers and native tribes, and brought order to mining camps where chaos had reigned. Between assignments, they returned to Redemption Creek, where Paige divided her time between helping Ellie Jenkins with the farm and teaching young women in town how to shoot and ride, skills she insisted were practical, not merely rebellious. "My husband agrees with me," she would say whenever someone objected, enjoying the way the words "my husband" felt on her tongue, still new and wonderful after nearly a year of marriage. For his part, Isaac watched her flourish with a sense of wonder and gratitude. He had married a wild woman, yes, one who refused to be confined by society's narrow expectations. But more importantly, he had married a free woman who chose every day to share that freedom with him. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat on the porch of their small house watching the sunset, Paige took Isaac's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have news," she said, her voice soft but steady. Isaac's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" She nodded. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We're having a baby in the spring." For a moment, he seemed speechless, emotions playing across his face in rapid succession: joy, wonder, concern. "How do you feel about it?" he finally asked. The question, so considerate, so typical of the man she had come to love, deeply made Paige smile. "Surprised," she admitted, "a little frightened, but mostly happy." Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Both of you." As the pregnancy progressed, Paige necessarily reduced her deputy duties, focusing on administrative work and local matters that didn't require hard riding or potential confrontation. Some days the limitation chafed. Other days, feeling the first fluttering movements of the life growing inside her, she found herself content with the temporary change of pace. Isaac became even more protective, though he tried to hide it, knowing how Paige valued her independence. She allowed his concern with more grace than she might have shown before, recognizing it as an expression of love rather than doubt in her capabilities. Their daughter, Emma Liberty Turner, was born on a bright May morning in 1877, with a shock of dark hair like her father's and eyes that would eventually settle into her mother's clear green. From her first breath, she was strong and determined, wild, like her mother, Isaac joked, earning a tired smile from Paige. Motherhood brought new challenges and joys that Paige had never anticipated. She discovered depths of tenderness within herself that she had kept carefully guarded, even from Isaac. Yet she remained fundamentally herself, riding out with Emma tucked securely against her chest in a special sling, teaching at the schoolhouse with the baby sleeping nearby, standing her ground when older women offered unsolicited advice about proper child rearing. When Emma was 6 months old, Paige resumed some of her deputy duties, though she and Isaac agreed she would only take assignments close to home for the time being. The arrangement worked well, allowing her to maintain her identity as more than just a mother while acknowledging the new priorities in her life. One evening, as they prepared for bed after settling Emma for the night, Isaac watched Paige brush out her long hair, a private ritual he still found captivating after nearly 2 years of marriage. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" she asked, catching his reflection in the mirror. "How different my life would be if you hadn't stepped off that stage coach," he replied honestly. "Emptier, lonelier." Paige set down her brush and turned to face him. "I was running away, when I came here. Running from another town where I didn't fit, another place where being different made me unwelcome. And now," she smiled, crossing the room to wrap her arms around him, "now I'm home, not because I've changed who I am, but because I found someone who loves me for exactly who I am." Isaac pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, her skin. "I do love who you are, every wild, free, magnificent part of you, and I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "My steadfast, honorable, surprisingly progressive husband." Their lips met in a kiss that held the promise of the night to come, and all the days that stretched before them, days that would bring challenges and adventures, quiet moments and passionate encounters. The steady building of a life together that neither had imagined possible before fate brought them together in a dusty frontier town. 5 years later, Redemption Creek had grown into a proper small town with a railway station, a school where Paige sometimes taught marksmanship to older students, and a new jail building where Isaac maintained his office as U.S. Marshal. Their family had expanded to include not only Emma, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's independence and her father's sense of justice, but also 3-year-old James, who watched the world with his father's thoughtful blue eyes. Paige divided her time between family, selective marshal duties, and community involvement, including organizing Redemption Creek's first women's suffrage meeting, much to the consternation of some traditionalists in town. "Your wife is causing quite a stir," the mayor told Isaac after one such gathering. Isaac merely smiled. "She usually does, it's one of her many talents." On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their expanded porch watching Emma and James chase fireflies in the yard, Paige leaned against Isaac's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, "marrying someone who causes stirs?" Isaac turned to her, his expression serious despite the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Paige Turner, in all our years together, I have regretted many things, risks not taken, words spoken in haste, that time I let you talk me into crossing the river during spring flooding." She laughed at the memory. "We made it, didn't we?" "Barely," he replied dryly. "But loving you, marrying you, never, not for a single moment." As the children ran back to them, breathless with excitement over their captured fireflies, Paige felt a fullness in her heart that once would have terrified her, a belonging, a rootedness that she had always associated with constraint. Instead, she had discovered that love, the right kind of love, didn't tame or diminish. It expanded, creating space for growth and change while providing a safe harbor in storms. They had built something rare and precious together, a partnership of equals, a family founded on respect and understanding, a love that celebrated rather than confined. "They still call me wild, she murmured as the children settled between them on the porch swing. Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "And I still say you're free, that's different." She smiled, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Different indeed, and wonderful beyond anything she could have imagined when she first stepped off that stagecoach, a solitary woman with a hidden pistol and a heart guarded against hurt, free to be herself, free to love and be loved, free to build a life that honored her spirit while embracing connection. As night fell over their home, wrapping them in peaceful darkness, Paige reflected that some journeys weren't about distance traveled, but about finding the place where you truly belonged, not a place that changed you, but one that recognized your value exactly as you were. For Paige Galloway Turner, that place wasn't Redemption Creek itself, but wherever Isaac and their children were, the family that had shown her that being wild and being loved weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones, like the sun and moon in a vast, open sky. "I love our life," she whispered to Isaac as the children dozed against them. "As do I," he replied, his voice low and filled with emotion, "every wild, wonderful moment of it." And as they gathered their sleeping children to carry them inside, Paige knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this freedom to be fully herself was everything she had been searching for all along.